I let my son humiliate me in front of the 20 most powerful people in my life. He stood up at a dinner I had arranged, looked me in the eyes across a table I had spent my entire career earning the right to sit at, and told the room I was no longer fit to lead the company I had built from absolutely nothing. He said it clearly, calmly, with the practiced confidence of someone who had rehearsed this speech and felt righteous delivering it. And I sat there. I did not interrupt. I did not defend myself. I did not raise my voice or my hand. I sat still, because behind my son's shoulder, I could see his wife watching me. She was smiling the way a person smiles when a plan is finally working, patient, quiet, certain, not a nervous smile, not a guilty one, the smile of someone who had done this before, twice actually, to two other men who had built things with their hands, who had trusted the wrong person at the wrong moment, who had never seen it coming until everything they had spent their lives constructing was already gone. I had seen it coming for 72 hours, and I had spent every single one of those hours making sure that when she finally reached for everything I had built, she would grab a trap instead. My name is Victor Calloway. I am 64 years old. I built Cornerstone Fabrication from a single welding truck and a stack of business cards I printed at a Kinko's on Shepherd Drive in 1986, and I thought the night I'm about to describe to you was a celebration. I was wrong. We were at the Montague Club in Houston's Galleria district, a room I had chosen deliberately because it was the kind of space that matched what we had accomplished. 22 of our most important clients and partners had gathered to mark the completion of the Hargrove Industrial Complex, a $31 million development that had taken 4 years and more of me than I knew I had left to give. These were people who had trusted my company with their names, their money, their futures. Some of them I had known since they were sitting across folding tables in borrowed office space, trying to figure out how to fund their first project. That's the thing nobody tells you about building a company over 38 years. The clients stop being clients somewhere around year 12. They become something else. Something that doesn't have a tidy name in business school, but that matters more than any contract ever could. Marcus stood up from his chair at the far end of the table, and the room felt it before he even opened his mouth. He was 34 years old, 6'1", broad across the shoulders from 4 years in the Navy, with the kind of presence you earn from being responsible for other people's lives in situations where the margin for error is zero. I had always been proud of how he carried himself. That night, for the first time, I was afraid of it. I think, he said, and his voice filled the room the way it always did. Measured, deliberate, trained, there's something we all need to acknowledge. My chest went tight. I want to be honest with you about something. I had felt it coming for months. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. The way Diane would smile when I made a suggestion at the office, not warmly, not dismissively, patiently, like someone watching a clock wind down. I had told myself these things weren't what they looked like. That is the thing about betrayal from the people you love. You choose not to see it because the alternative is too heavy to hold. My father built something extraordinary, Marcus said. 20 heads nodded. People who had known me since before Marcus was born, who had watched me honor every promise I made. But extraordinary things require evolution. And Cornerstone Fabrication has stopped evolving. He paused and looked directly at me. My father won't let it. Carol Newen, who had trusted me with her first commercial development 14 years ago, set her wine glass down on the table, very carefully, very quietly. The sound seemed enormous. My wife has an MBA from Georgetown. She has worked at 3 major firms, and she understands this industry in ways that... Marcus stopped. He straightened his jacket, exactly the way he used to straighten his collar as a boy, before he said something he knew I wouldn't want to hear. My father no longer does. One sentence. 38 years. Gone. I'm proposing that Diane become a full partner in Cornerstone Fabrication, he continued. A 50% partner with full authority over strategic direction. And if that's not something my father is prepared to accept, he looked around the table at the faces of people I had built my life around, then perhaps it's time he stepped back from leadership entirely. I looked past my son's shoulder to where Diane was seated at the side table where spouses and family had been placed. She wasn't looking at Marcus. She wasn't looking at the table. She was looking at me. And the expression on her face was the one I had failed to name for the 18 months she had been in my life. Not love. Not even ambition. Calculation. Honestly, I want to stop for a second and tell you what that moment actually felt like, because when people hear a story like this, they imagine some dramatic movie scene emotion. Rage. Tears. A voice that breaks. That is not what happened inside me. What happened was quieter and much worse than any of those things. It was the sensation of a very long bridge you have been standing on for your entire adult life quietly detaching from the shore behind you, not collapsing, just releasing. And you realize that everything on that shore, every year, every sacrifice, every choice you made because you believed it was building towards something, is now separated from you by water. I stood up slowly, gripped the edge of the table for 2 full seconds before I trusted my legs. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," I said. I made my voice quiet on purpose. When the room is already silent, a quiet voice is the loudest thing in it. Change is coming to this company. I looked at Diane for the first time that evening, really looked at her. The way you look at something you are seeing clearly for the first time. Her smile flickered. Just slightly, just enough to tell me everything. But it may not be the change either of you is expecting. Then I walked out. I drove home through Houston at 11 at night, and I sat in my study until 3 in the morning, and I looked at the photographs on the walls, the way a man looks at them when he suspects he is seeing them for the last time. The oldest one shows Elaine and me standing outside our first office, a 300-square-foot space above a dry cleaning shop on Shepherd Drive. She was 7 months pregnant. I was holding the lease with both hands like a man holding something fragile, because that is exactly what it was. She had her head on my shoulder, and she was laughing at something I had said. And the light in that photograph is the kind of late-afternoon Houston gold that makes everything look like it belongs in a painting. Elaine died of a cardiac event when Marcus was 13. No warning. No chance to prepare. Just the phone call you spend your entire life hoping never to receive, and then you are standing in a hospital corridor in clothes you put on that morning without knowing they would be the clothes you wore the night. Everything changed. The night she died, Marcus and I sat together for 2 hours in the hospital waiting room without speaking. I held him and he held me, and neither of us had a single useful word. I made him a silent promise in that silence. Whatever I built, it would be for him. Every early morning, every contract signed at midnight, every school play I missed because I was in a meeting 3 states away. All of it was going to matter because it was going toward something. Looking at Elaine's photograph at 3 in the morning, I asked myself a question I had been afraid to ask for years. When did I stop being his father and start being his inheritance? I picked up the phone at 7 the next morning and called Carol Nguyen. "I need the best private investigator you know," I said, without preamble, "and I need them to look into Diane. Everything. Before Marcus. Everything." There was a long pause. "Victor, are you sure you want to do this?" "Carol, in 14 years, have I ever asked you for anything I didn't absolutely need?" She sighed. "Give me 24 hours. Those 24 hours were the longest of my life in recent memory. I walked through every room in my house and let the memories land differently than they had in years. The kitchen where Elaine taught Marcus to make her mother's biscuits from scratch. The garage where I taught him to weld a straight bead at age 11, and he was so proud of that first clean line that he wanted to frame it. The living room where we watched football together every Sunday for years until Sundays started belonging to Diane, and then Marcus stopped calling on Sundays, and I had told myself that was just what happened when your children grew up and started their own lives. I had done a lot of telling myself things that weren't quite true. Carol called at 6:15 the next evening. "Victor," she said, "sit down." Her real name was not Diane Harmon. It was Diane Rourke. And she had been married twice before Marcus, both times to men who had built something with their hands, both times with results that were not accidental. Her first husband was a man named Michael Tan, who owned a restaurant group in Dallas, married in 2016, 7 months. When she left, she walked away with 40% of his business in the settlement. Michael sold 2 of his 5 locations to cover it. He had not spoken publicly about any of it since. Her second husband was Preston Locke, an engineer in Austin who owned a specialist manufacturing firm, 8 months in 2019. She had convinced him to make her a partner in the business before the divorce was filed. She left with half his equity and an NDA that had kept the story buried under 3 years of silence. 2 marriages. 2 men who had built something over decades. 2 lives dismantled in less than a year each, with the precision of someone who had done this before and fully intended to do it again. I sat with that information and let it settle in. If you have ever had a moment where the present and the past suddenly align, and you really see the pattern that was there the whole time, then you understand the feeling I am trying to describe. It is not simply shock. It is colder than shock. It is the recognition that someone has been running a planned operation inside what you believed was your life. And the worst part is not the anger. The worst part is the question you cannot stop asking. What did I miss, and when did I miss it? And could I have protected him if I had been paying closer attention? Maybe. Maybe not, but I was paying attention now. There's more, Carol said. Of course there was. Diane owed $90,000 to a creditor named Eddie Marsh, a man whose legitimate business interests in Houston did not fully represent the scope of his professional activities. The loan was 4 months past due. Marsh's people had been making contact with increasing directness. She wasn't just looking for security. She was running from a wall she had already walked into, and Marcus's family name was the door she needed to get through before it closed entirely. And she had researched Marcus for months before they ever met. The investigator found social media archives, charity event registration lists, a gala guest list from 8 months before their first conversation. She had built a profile. She knew his military background, his family business, his relationship with me. She knew exactly which questions to ask, and which version of herself to present when she walked into the room where he was standing. She had not fallen in love. She had executed a plan. I want to pause here, because I know what some of you are thinking. You're wondering whether what I did next was fair, whether there was a gentler path, whether I should have gone to Marcus first and laid everything out, and trusted him to see what I could see. I had that debate with myself for most of that night, and here is the honest answer. I had tried gentler. I had offered quiet counsel about moving slowly, about being careful, about not rushing major decisions. I had been patient in the way a father is patient when he wants to believe his son will find his way back on his own. None of that had worked. And a man who has spent 38 years building things knows, eventually, when it is time to stop hoping and start building. The morning after Carol's call, I walked into Cornerstone Fabrication before anyone else and began the most important work of my career. I called Gerald Whitmore at Whitmore Properties, Ray Okonkwo at Okonkwo Steel Partners, and every major client relationship I had built over 3.5 decades. Not to warn them, not to alarm them. Simply to make one thing clear, quietly, and without drama. Victor Calloway and Cornerstone Fabrication's letterhead were two different things, and if they ever needed someone they could count on, they had my direct number. Ray Okonkwo said something I keep coming back to. Victor, he said, I never hired a company. I hired you. I visited Pete Renner at Renner Steel Supply, who had been selling to me since 1994. I sat in his cluttered office and told him, plainly, that there might be changes at Cornerstone soon that he should know about, that any credit extensions or supply arrangements made without my direct sign-off in the coming weeks deserved scrutiny. Pete leaned back in his chair and studied my face for a long moment. You know what, Victor? He said finally. I've been supplying steel to your company for 30 years because you're a man who pays what he owes and keeps his word. That's not a corporate quality. That's a personal one. He extended his hand across the desk. You've got my word. Working through attorneys Diane had never encountered, I established Callaway Industrial Group as a private sole proprietorship. Then I licensed to this new entity every piece of intellectual property that gave Cornerstone its operational value, project management frameworks, quality protocols, vendor pricing structures, client communication systems. The licensing arrangement contained a single critical clause. If I ceased to be actively involved in Cornerstone's operations for any reason, the licenses terminated automatically and immediately. On paper, Cornerstone Fabrication was still a $45 million company. In practice, without those licenses, it was a company name and a commercial lease. Then I drew 2 business loans, $210,000 and $165,000, both against Cornerstone's existing credit lines, both processed in the 3 days before the partnership signing. Legitimate equipment purchases, properly documented, and both structured under terms that made all partners present and future jointly and severally liable for the outstanding balances. That Friday evening I called Marcus and Diane and asked them to meet me for dinner at the Bayou Grand. I've reviewed everything, I told them over appetizers, letting my voice carry the careful, considered tone of a man who had thought very hard about something and reached a peaceful conclusion. I'm prepared to accept your terms. I watched Diane's shoulders drop half an inch. That involuntary exhale of relief. She was very good at what she did. She had practiced this version of herself for years, and she had it nearly perfect. But the body has its own language, and I had been reading people's bodies across negotiating tables for 4 decades. "We're so glad to hear that, Victor," she said. "This is going to be good for all of us." "I'd like to sign tonight, actually," I said. "The documents are in my car. There's a notary 2 blocks away who works late on Fridays. Why wait?" Marcus looked surprised. Diane looked at me the way a person looks when they are trying to decide whether an unexpected gift is genuine. She decided it was. We signed at 9:47 p.m. Monday morning, Diane arrived early and sat at the head of the conference table in my old chair. She had a new nameplate. She had a stack of files. She had the expression of a person who believes they have just arrived somewhere they always deserve to be. She called Gerald Whitmore at 10 a.m. to introduce herself as managing partner and explain her vision for modernizing Cornerstone's operations. Gerald called me at 10:23. She called Ray Okonkwo at 10:45. Ray called me at 10:51 and said 3 words, "I will not repeat." By noon, she had burned through 6 client calls. By 1 p.m., she was sitting in the conference room, files closed in front of her, asking Marcus in a tight and controlled voice why none of the clients seemed to know who she was. My office phone rang. Detective Sandra Reyes from the Financial Crimes Division, inquiring about some irregularities in Cornerstone's recent ownership filings. I had flagged a concern myself about undisclosed personal liabilities being introduced into a business partnership, and the call was the result. I answered on speakerphone, my voice carrying just enough measured surprise to be convincing. The color left Diane's face. 20 minutes later, Carol Wynn's line rang through, also on speaker. She had been contacted by a representative of Eddie Marsh, who had learned that the woman who owed him $90,000 had just become a partner in a fabrication company and wanted to discuss a resolution timeline. And then I placed the investigator's folder on the conference table. I want to slow down here, because this is the moment everything turned, and I want to describe it to you the way it actually happened, not the way a tidy story would need it to happen. The room was absolutely still. Marcus sat frozen across the table from me. Diane had her hand wrapped around her coffee cup and was gripping it hard enough that her knuckles had gone pale. I could hear the building's ventilation system. I could hear a delivery truck on the street below. I could hear my own breathing. Diane did not look at the folder. She already knew what was in it. Marcus did look at it. He read slowly, then faster, then slower again as specific pages seemed to carry different weights. I watched my son's face change in real time as he read confusion first, then disbelief, then something I recognized as grief. Not rage, not vindication, grief. Because that is what it actually feels like when you discover that someone you loved was running a planned operation with your life as the vehicle. The first emotion is not anger. It is loss. "The partnership agreement you signed Friday evening," I said, keeping my voice level and quiet, "makes you jointly liable for any outstanding debts and financial obligations of Cornerstone Fabrication. That includes $210,000 in equipment loans and a $165,000 line of credit processed Thursday and Friday of last week." Section 14, paragraph 3. Marcus found the clause. I watched the moment he found it. Diane looked up from the table and said, in a voice stripped of every layer of warmth she had spent 18 months constructing, "You set this up." "I protected what I built," I said. "You planned to take it. We both knew what we were doing. The difference is that I was honest about mine." She stood. She picked up her phone. She walked out of the building. Not dramatically. Not with screaming or accusations or a door slamming. Quietly, the way a person leaves a room when they are already planning their next move. I suspect she made a call within 30 seconds of the elevator closing behind her. I suspect she had an exit plan the same way she had an entry plan prepared, detailed, and deployed the moment she realized the game had changed. Marcus and I sat in the conference room after she left, and neither of us spoke for a very long time. I want to be clear about something. That silence was not a victory. I have felt victory before the close of a major contract, the completion of a building I am proud of, and it feels expansive, open, warm. This silence was none of those things. This was a father sitting across from a son who had just watched the scaffolding of his entire recent life pull away, and whatever else I felt that afternoon, it was smaller, much smaller than the weight of watching my son's face. If you have ever sat in a room with someone you love, while they absorb a truth that will change everything for them, and all you can do is be present, not fix it, not explain it away, just be there, then you know the specific helplessness I am describing. It is one of the heaviest feelings a human being can carry. 3 weeks later, the bankruptcy filing came through for Cornerstone Fabrication. The license agreements had reverted. The clients had redirected their business. Pete Renner's supply arrangements had quietly followed me to Callaway Industrial Group, which by then had 3 active contracts and more inbound interest than I could immediately staff. Marcus called on a Tuesday morning, asked if he could come to the office. He arrived looking like a man who had aged a decade in 30 days. Wrinkled jacket, eyes that had not been sleeping. He sat in the chair across my desk and stared at his hands for almost 2 full minutes before he said anything. "She filed for divorce Monday," he said. "Fraud-based dissolution. She's claiming I misrepresented my financial position." He let out a breath that had no humor in it whatsoever. "She's not entirely wrong. I did misrepresent it. I thought I was going to hand her half of a $45 million company. Instead, she got half of a bankruptcy." He looked up at me. "Dad? I don't think she ever—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "I know," I said. "How did you see it when I couldn't?" I thought about Elaine. About what it feels like to be in a room with someone who genuinely loves you, the specific quality of that warmth, the way it makes the future feel less frightening, the way it asks nothing strategic from you at all. Real love does not have a contingency plan. Real love is just to present. It shows up without an agenda and stays without a condition. "Because I have known the real thing," I said. "And when you have held the real thing, you learn to feel the difference." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said the words I had waited without knowing I was waiting to hear for years. "Dad, I am sorry. Not only for Diane, for all of it. For what I said at that dinner. For what I let her convince me about you. For treating everything you built like it was an obstacle in my way instead of the ground I was standing on." I opened my desk drawer and placed a business card on the table between us. "Callaway Industrial Group, Project Manager, Field Operations. The starting salary is $46,000 a year," I said. "Performance review at 6 months. The work is physical and it is early, and it will be nothing like what you think you are entitled to." He looked at the card for a long time. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you the same thing I had when I was 21 years old, with a welding truck and a stack of business cards. A place to begin. Everything after that, you will have to build yourself." Marcus picked up the card. "Monday morning?" he asked. 6:45 a.m., I said. "Don't be late. Here is what I want to leave you with. This story is not really about business. I already knew enough about business when all of this began. What it taught me, what it took losing nearly everything to understand clearly, is the difference between a legacy and a lesson. I spent 38 years trying to give Marcus a legacy. Something finished, something he would not have to struggle for. And in doing so, I had accidentally taught him that things of value could be received rather than earned. That was my mistake. Not his ambition, not even his blindness to what Diane was doing. My mistake was believing that the greatest gift a father could offer his child was a destination, when the only real gift, the one Elaine understood completely, and I had to relearn the hard way, is the strength to make the journey. The mistake most people make is protecting their children from struggle, when struggle is the only school that teaches the things that actually last. If you are a parent watching this, sit with this question tonight. Am I raising someone who knows how to build something or someone who is simply waiting to inherit it? And if you are someone who has been betrayed by a person you trusted, someone who looked you in the eyes and made you believe in something that was never real, I want you to hear this clearly. Their manipulation tells you everything about their desperation and nothing about your worth. Victor lost a company. He did not lose himself. Those are 2 very different things, and knowing the difference is what allows you to start again. Callaway Industrial Group now employs 43 people across 4 active Houston area projects. Marcus has been with the company for 14 months. He shows up early. He stays late. He is learning slowly, without shortcuts, without anyone handing him a title, what it actually means to build something. We have dinner together on the first Sunday of every month. We don't spend much of those dinners talking about what happened, but we talk. And after everything, that is enough. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with a 1, 2, or 3. Type 1 if you think Victor should have gone to Marcus directly the moment he learned the truth about Diane before setting any trap. Type 2 if you believe he made the right call protecting the company first and letting the truth reveal itself. Type 3 if there's something you think he should have done completely differently, something you can't stop turning over in your mind. I read every single comment, even when I don't always have time to respond. Tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country, what time it is there right now. I am always amazed at how far these stories reach, and I genuinely want to know who is out there listening. And if you have ever experienced something like this, a betrayal that came from inside your family, a moment where you had to choose between protecting someone you loved and telling them a truth they were not ready to hear, share it below. You don't need to name anyone, but your story matters, and I promise you that someone in this comment section tonight needs to know they are not